Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video on Warhammer. I'm Street from Street Scream Gaming, and today I'm going to attempt to paint my very first miniature, the Canoptech Scarabs. I'm going to be using a mix of Runefang Steel, Runelord Brass, White Scar, Agrax Earthshade and Tesseract Glow to do it. Just using a small paintbrush I picked up from the local Kmart. I know nothing about painting or anything like that. I'm a bricklayer, so chime in on the comments. I'd love to hear some opinions and feedback. So for the first step, I'm just base coating these legs in Runefang Steel. Now, painting the individual legs is pretty easy as they're all spaced out pretty well, so there's not much danger of making a mess, even with pretty shaky hands like mine. But with this progression of painting, it really doesn't matter that much on this model anyway, as it's very easily corrected with some details later. And as small as this model is, I found it pretty easy to work on, to be honest. Part that I took care on here is where the legs met the body, and once more, it's not really an issue if you make a mistake, because you can kind of cover it up with the parapet quite a bit, so it was just less work to clean up, so I try to stay a bit neater. Down with 1 or 2 drops of water really, I found, to help really spread a lot nicer and not clog up those details, which I appreciate the multitude of YouTube painters with all their tutorials for that tip. I was honestly just going to use it out the pot, and I'm pretty sure in some places that's fine, but with these models being so small, I didn't really want to risk up taking any of those smaller details. I just use like a normal plastic lid for metallics, and is it just me or do they seem to dry out really fast? And even after you've coated the legs pretty easily, just put the mini aside to completely dry before moving on to the next step. Now, all I'm doing here is I'm just trying to paint the carapace, or the bodies of these scarabs, in the Runelord Brass. Now, it's pretty well defined, and it's pretty easy to kind of get it out and cover it without getting paint all over the place. At least I found it anyway. I'm sure there's a lot better painters out there that have a lot better techniques than me, just kind of breaking it down into these steps. But after watching a bunch of these YouTube tutorials, I kind of figured that this is probably my best go-to. Just block out those bulk colors and then correct little details like later. But it's pretty easy to get in there. There's the little heads, easy enough to do. The bodies are easy enough to do. Everything's very finely separated, except for kind of where the legs meet the carapace. But aside from that, it's quite easy to paint, I found anyway. Good for me to learn on, I guess. Done is just avoided the little orbs, tried to avoid the orbs in the head and the rear of the body, in the center of the carapace, just for the later stages when we try and do that glow effect. See how that comes out. I found when I was thinning out the paints that I got them a little bit too thin, I guess. As you can see in the rear of the model there, it's very dull, so I ended up going back over and just giving them all a touch up, brightening everything up, after adding a little bit more paint to the mix I had going. I don't add them to the wet palette, the metallics. I was heard, whatever, not to. I don't know if that's true or not, but I haven't done it anyway, and I find that they dry out super fast, so I only add like the tiniest bit of paint to the tiniest bit of water and just work on the models one at a time. And it's at this point here I just go back over and do some touch-ups with the Runefang Steel. I'm just covering in any of the parts that I missed initially. I probably should have paid a bit more attention. And just tidying up all the legs where I potentially spilt, a little bit of the Runelord Brass onto as I was colouring in the carapaces. I mean, I paint quite fast. I should really probably slow it down. Infilling those little parts on the back between the wings that I probably should have, in hindsight, done to start with, but we got there in the end. I felt that looks pretty good, just taking care not to catch those little orbs that are going to go in for the highlights of the Tesseract Glow on the next step. So I'm just proceeding to go through all the 3 little models that I'm painting and just touching them all up, getting it all done and getting them ready. Now, we're coming through here and we're just adding a bit of the Agrax Earthshade just to some of the recesses and to a bit of the initially I start with the recesses, but eventually I kind of just thin it down a little bit with some water and spread it over most of the models just to add some variations in the tones so they're not just so, I guess, monotone in those 2 colours. I find it adds a little bit of separation, some more detail, very simply, and it doesn't really ruin or wash these models down too much, I guess you could say. It goes very well, very nicely. We just applied in small amounts. I was actually really happy with the results from it. They did seem way too bright and too factory-made prior. I probably could have even done maybe 1 or 2 more just to get them a bit dirtier, but they look pretty nice with the Agrax Earthshade just washed over them. They make the colours kind of, pop and suit the Necrons more, I think, personally. All right, next up, we're using the White Scar to set as a base for the glow effect. So I watched a couple of YouTube videos, and I didn't have any Corvax White or anything, so I just had the White Scar. And I'm just painting all the central orbs on all the scarabs and the little dots on their head. Trying to be neat, but I got quite a thick brush, whatever you want to call it, without a very fine point. So on the orbs, it's fine. So I'm just rotating the models to get that orb done without spilling too much paint. And then going backwards and, touching the dots on the heads and just doing right where the carapace meets that orb, that little circular recess. I'm just edge highlighting that almost with a thick coat of the white paint, and I'm doing that on all the models, and that just creates a base for that Tesseract glow to apparently really pop. So at this point now, we're going through and we're applying the Tesseract glow, which I might add takes forever to bloody shake up, and just applying that to all the set white paint, taking care not to kind of spill it over onto the Runelord brass or the steel, but once more that can be touched up again later on. But yeah, so we're just going over and filling in all the white and getting it sorted. I think it has a really good look to it. And I think maybe it could have contrasted a bit better if I had maybe some more dark colours and more dark tones on there, given that the Runelord brass and the Runefang steel is quite abrupt, even when washed. But I kind of just apply it pretty liberally. I figure once it's all put on there and it's gone over the lot of them, I can just go back with the Runelord brass or Runefang steel and just touch up if I need to. And it just applies really easily once it's shaken up, and I really do like the look of it. I was considering adding some of that maybe Warpstone glow to give a bit more of a variation in the colour of it and maybe add some more contrast, but I think it looks pretty good as it is. I mean, I'm definitely no expert and my skills are pretty subpar. But, giving it a go, and I think they come out, okay. I've got the Elite starter set I believe we bought, and so I've got a whole lot more to paint. So this is the finished result. Let me know in the comments what you think, and stay tuned to watch me struggle with some more.